This guest will forever be remembered for his first major. A Mets fan's favorite, quick flying. Quite simply, the best defense. This left-hander ranks in the top 10 in franchise history in wins, innings pitched, and strikeouts. Championship Series with Commander Robin and Tom.
Welcome aboard, everybody, here to the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you in voiceover for another road trip video. This time heading to Citi Field for the Old Timers Day ceremony with the New York Mets. And it was one of the great moments, one of the great events, anyway, that the Mets have ever really put together. Now, Old Timers Day for the Mets is something that doesn't happen very often. In fact, the last time it happened for the Mets, you got to go way, way, way back to 1994, and even then, it doesn't even come close. If you look up what they did that year, 94, doesn't even come close. Pales in comparison to what this Mets ownership group has done. Steve Cohen has done to put together a collection of some of the best players that have played for the Mets throughout its history, throughout its 60-year history. And look, everyone has over time scuffed at the Mets. Even Met fans have scuffed at the Mets because of how many ludicrous losses they've had, painful losses they've had over the years, close calls they've had over the years. But when you really look at the history of this team, this is a franchise that's had a tremendous amount of great talent come through, whether it be Shea Stadium and now Citi Field. And to have a vast majority of them come together, players that span 60 years, as I just mentioned, from the 1962 when this team was formed, all the way till now, coming together, it was such a raw motion. It's hard to quantify and really describe that from the fan perspective, other than it just being such a surreal moment. I mean, you go through the player introductions, and you have one player after another get mentioned. You have players like Dave Kingman, and you have Cleon Jones, and then they mention guys like Lee Mazzilli, and then they mention Joe Torre, who, yes, for those who are of a certain age, may not remember, yes, Joe Torre was a Met before he was a Yankee manager way back when, player manager for that matter. And then you have players like, obviously, going through more of the more recent times, going through the teams of the 80s, Darryl Strawberry, Doc Gooden, Keith Hernandez, and then you bring out guys like Al Leiter and Jose Reyes and Cliff Floyd, and then Benny Agbayani, who got a standing ovation, Bartolo Colon, who probably got the loudest ovation of all, Mike Piazza. I mean, you go through all these names that have come through here and have had an impact on this franchise. Once they got to the game, it kind of felt like a time warp in a lot of ways. And you got to give it to Steve Cohen because he has changed the culture. He has changed the culture totally. And for years under the Wilpons, this team has virtually ignored its history. And I found it interesting that Ray Knight was actually asked about that, and it was posted on Twitter, where he says Ray Knight saying that he loves the Mets but does not like the Wilpons. And for Steve Cohen to come in here, 19 months, not even 2 whole years, completely change the feeling of this organization. When you go into Citi Field, it feels like a party. And you kind of felt that, a few weeks ago, about a month or so ago, during the Keith Hernandez jersey retirement, where it just kind of felt like one big party, one big celebration. And that's really what this felt like. It was just one big celebration. And let's keep in mind, for a lot of these guys, we may not see them, on a field ever again. You may not see a lot of these guys that showed up there ever again, and that's what adds even more emotion and gravitas to this moment, and what adds more to what Steve Cohen did for really this entire franchise. And look, you needed a Met fan to take control of this team. That's what the Mets have here in Steve Cohen. Obviously, the team being in first place certainly adds a lot of goodwill, obviously, the way things are going right now for the Mets. But it starts with the owner. It starts with the top, and you have a guy right now who is dedicated to really righting a lot of the wrongs that have been done with this franchise. And one of those wrongs that has now been righted, of course, is Willie Mays and retiring of his number, which nobody expected to happen. Nobody knew that this was going to happen. It wasn't even announced.
That in accordance with Mrs. Mason's wishes, and at the urging of his former Mets teammates, in recognition of his contributions to the Mets, as well as baseball in New York and the country at large, Willie Mays, 24, will take its place in the left field corner here at Citi Field with the other greats in Mets history. From this day forth, no Met will ever wear Willie Mays' iconic number 24. In his honor, please welcome his son Michael, representing the Mays family, and joining Willie's teammates on the field for this very special moment.
Cohen picking up the promise that the original Mets owner, Joan Payson, promised to Willie Mays, saying that your number would never be worn by anybody else in Mets history. Well, unfortunately, as we all know, over the years, there have been many different players who have worn 24, like Ricky Henderson, Robinson Cano, more recently worn that number. But now nobody will wear that number. And it's important that the Mets did that because now the Mets are actually recognizing the Giants portion of their history. You know, for years, under the Wilpons, it's always been, very Dodger-esque, focused on the Brooklyn Dodgers. Obviously, Fred Wilpon being a native of Brooklyn, a big Dodgers fan, that's really all the focus has been. Building a stadium looks like Ebbets Field, the Jackie Robinson Rotunda. And the Giants portion of this Mets history, the reason why the Mets are here, it's kind of gone ignored. And it's nice to see that finally get recognized by the Mets, by Steve Cohen, because Joan Payson, the original owner of the Mets, was, in case those who do not know, was in fact a minority owner of the New York Giants when they were here, and wanted to bring back Willie Mays, wanted to bring back some of that old feeling that the New York Giants had, baseball Giants had in this town. And to see that kind of connection get recognized, very, very nice touch by the New York Mets. Extremely nice touch. So this wasn't just a celebration of Mets history. It was really a celebration of baseball history, for that matter.
Lighters coming in relief by Tyler Colon.
And we stand with the rosters expanded by 2 on September 1st.
He wants to pitch the hit. Hit it.
We are going to go.
We survived.
You want to see him hit it out of here.
He said, I got to go do some sprints.
There's a drive. Wilkie catch up to it. That one.